So, moving swiftly on, or as swiftly as possible, we're now up to chapter 3, which is Heroes or Exiles. But because all the advice is telling us in these difficult times in this country to make sure we stick to our usual schedules, I'm now having my break time. So, banana, grapes, coffee. You lot go and have a little bit of a playtime. And yeah, we'll carry on in 5 minutes when I finish it. Okay, break over. Cheers, everyone. So, shall we crack on? Shift my rubbish, shift my coffee, grab the book back. New pose, Mr. Roberts, if you don't mind. What about that? Don't know. Relax. Alright, I suppose. Right. Chapter 3, Heroes or Exiles. The boys scrambled over the slimy pebbles at the edge of the beach and back up Madman's Gully, the gorge they had climbed through a couple of hours before. This was a narrow crack in the cliffs filled with large rocks. They tried to move as quickly as they could, but this is difficult when you are slipping and sliding over huge stones covered in ice, and they made painfully slow progress. A dragon that hadn't been put off by the snow came shrieking down into the gorge. He landed on Warty Hog's back and started savaging in him, sinking his fangs into Warty Hog's shoulder and ripping red lines into his arms. Gobber bashed the dragon on the nose with the handle of his axe, and the dragon let go and flapped away. But a whole wave of dragons replaced him, pouring into the canyon with awful rasping cries and fire shooting from their nostrils and melting the snow before them. Talons spread wickedly as they swooped downward. Gobber stood, legs wide apart, and whirled his big double-headed axe. He threw back his great hairy head and yelled a terrible primeval yell that echoed down the sides of the gorge and made the hairs on the back of Hiccup's neck stick straight up like the spines on a sea urchin. Individually, dragons tend to have a healthy sense of self-preservation, but they are braver when they hunt in packs. They knew now they had the advantage of massive numbers, so they didn't check their flying for an instant. They just kept on coming. Gobber let go of the axe. Spinning end to end, the axe soared up through the softly falling snow. It hit the biggest dragon of the lot, killing him instantly, and then carried on going, landing in a snowdrift hundreds of feet away and disappearing. This made the rest of the dragons think a bit. Some of them scrambled over each other in their haste to fly away, yelping like dogs. The others came to a halt, hovering uncertainly, screaming defiance but keeping their distance. Waste of a good axe, grunted Gobber. Keep going, boys, it could come back. Hiccup needed no encouragement to keep going. As soon as he got out of the gorge and onto the marshy land behind it, he broke into a stumbling run, every now and then falling flat on his face in the snow. Some time later, when Gobber reckoned they were a safe distance from Wild Dragon Cliff, he yelled at the boys to stop. Very carefully, he counted heads again to check he hadn't lost anybody. Gobber had spent an unpleasant 10 minutes standing at the mouth of the dragon's cave, wondering why there was such a terrible racket, and what he was going to say to Stoic the Vast if he had lost his precious son and heir for good. Something tactful and sensitive, he supposed. But tact and sensitivity were not really Gobber's strong point. And he took the first 5 minutes to come up with, "Sorry, boss, Hiccup copped it," and then spent the second 5 minutes tearing his beard out. Consequently, though, secretly mightily relieved, he was not in a good mood, and as soon as he could get his breath back, he exploded all over the place. As the boys stood shivering violently in a bedraggled line. Never in 14 years have I come across such a load of hopeless barnacles as you lot. Which of you useless mollusks was responsible for waking up that dragon? I was, said Hiccup, which wasn't strictly true. Oh, that's brilliant, bellowed Gobber. Just brilliant. Our future leader shows off his magnificent leadership skills, at the tender age of 10½, he does his best to annihilate himself and the rest of you in a simple military exercise. Snotlout sniggered. You find something amusing about that, Snotlout? Asked Gobber, with dangerous softness. Everybody is on limpet rations for the next 3 weeks. The boys groaned. Smart work, Hiccup, sneered Snotlout. I can't wait to see you in action on the battlefield. Silence! Yelled Gobber. This is your initiation, not a day out in the country. Silence! Or you'll be lunching on lungworms for the rest of your lives. Now, continued Gobber more calmly, although that was an absolute mess, it wasn't a total disaster. I presume you all have a dragon. Yes, chorused the boys. Fishlegs took a sideways glance at Hiccup, who was staring straight ahead. Lucky for you, said Gobber ominously. So you have all passed the first test, the first part of the dragon test. There are, however, still 2 parts that you have to complete before you can become a full member of the Hairy Hooligan tribe. Your next task will be to train this dragon yourself. This will be a test of the force of your personality. You will assert your will over this wild creature and show it who is master. Your dragon will be expected to obey simple commands such as go and stay, and hunt fish for you in a way that dragons have hunted for the sons of Thor since anybody can remember. If you are worried about the training process, you should study a book called How to Train Your Dragon by Professor Yobbish, which you will find in the fireplace at the Great Hall. Suddenly, Gobber looked very pleased with himself. I stole that book from the Meathead Public Library myself, he said modestly, regarding his very black fingernails, from right under the nose of the hairy, scary librarian. He never noticed a thing. Now that's burglary for you. Wartyhog put up his hand. What happens if we can't read, sir? No boasting, Wartyhog, boomed Gobber. Get somebody to read it for you. Your dragons will begin to go back to sleep because this is still their hibernation time. Some of the dragons had, indeed, gone very quiet inside the baskets. So take them home and put them in a warm place. They should wake up in the next couple of weeks. You will then have only 4 months to prepare for Initiation Day at the Thursday celebrations and the final part of your test. If, on that day, you can prove that you have trained your dragon to the satisfaction of myself and the other elders of the tribe, you can finally call yourself a hooligan of Berk. The boys stood very tall and tried to look like proper hooligans. Heroes or exile, yelled Gobber the Belch. Heroes or exile, yelled 8 boys, fanatically back at him. Exile, thought Fishlegs, and Hiccup, sadly. Was that a big slurp? Hey, did you hear that? Apologies. Carrying on. I hate being a Viking, panted Fishlegs to Hiccup as they stumbled back through the bracken to the hooligan village. You don't really walk on the island of Berk, you wade. You either waded through heather, or through bracken, or through mud, or through snow, and it clung onto your legs and it made them difficult to lift. It was the sort of country where the sea and the land were always kind of falling into one another and getting mixed up. The island was shot through with holes burrowed by the water, a maze of crisscrossing underground streams. You could put your foot in a solid-looking piece of grass and find yourself disappearing up to your thigh in black, sticky mud. You could be making your way through the ferns and suddenly find yourself fording a river, waist-high and icy cold. The boys were already soaked to the skin with seawater, and now the snow had turned to horizontal driving rain, blowing in their faces with the strength of one of the gale-force winds that were always shrieking across the sky and the salty wastelands of Burke. A narrow escape from horrible death thirsting on Thursday morning, complained Fishlegs, followed by complete rejection of the junior half of the tribe. Nobody's going to talk to me for years after this, except you, of course, Hiccup, but then you're just a weirdo like me. Oh, thank you, said Hiccup. And on top of everything, continued Fishlegs bitterly, a 2-mile run carrying a deranged dragon on my back. The basket on Fishlegs' back was plunging wildly from side to side, as the dragon inside tried maniacally to get out. And only a dinner of horrible limpets to look forward to at the end of it. Hiccup agreed that it wasn't a particularly delicious prospect. You can have this dragon back if you like. Hiccup, I warn you, they're filthy heavy when they're wet and cross, said Fishlegs miserably. Gobber's going to go off like a typhoon when he finds out you ain't got one. But I have got one, said Hiccup. Fishlegs stopped and began to take the basket off his back. Well, I know, it is yours, really, he sighed wearily. I think I'll just go straight past the village and keep on running till I reach somewhere civilised. Rome, perhaps. I've always wanted to go to Rome. And I haven't got a hope in Valhalla of passing initiation anyway. I said, No! I've got another one in my basket, Hiccup insisted. Fishlegs' jaws dropped open in disbelief. I got it when I went back up the tunnel, explained Hiccup. Well, blister my barnacles, said Fishlegs. How in Thor's name did you know it was there? It was so dark you couldn't see the horns in front of you. It was weird, said Hiccup. I sort of sensed it when we were running down the tunnel. I couldn't see anything, but as we were passing, I just knew there was a dragon there, and that it was meant to be my dragon. I was going to ignore it, actually, because we were in a bit of a hurry, but then you said about not having a dragon, so I went back, and there it was, just lying on this shelf in the tunnel, just as I'd imagined it would be. Well, jigger my jellyfish, said Fishlegs, and the boy started running again. Hiccup was bruised all over, shaking from shock, and he had a nasty dragon wound in his calf, which was stinging like crazy from the salt water. It was freezing cold, and there was an irritating bit of seaweed in one of his sandals. He was also a bit worried because he knew he should not have risked his life trying to get a dragon for Fishlegs. This was not the act of a Viking hero. A Viking hero would know not to intervene between Fishlegs and his fate. On the other hand, Hiccup had been worried about dragon catching for far longer than he could remember. He had been sure he would be the only one to come back without a dragon, and shame, embarrassment, and awful exile would follow. And now, here he was, a Viking warrior, with his own dragon. So, on the whole, he was feeling fairly pleased with himself. Things were looking up. You know, Hiccup, said Fishlegs a little later, as the wooden fortifications of the village appeared on the horizon. That sounds like fate. You sensing the dragon was there, like that. I mean, this could be meant to be. You could have some sort of wonder dragon in there. Something that makes a monstrous nightmare look like a flying frog. You are the son of the chief and the heir, after all. And it's about time fate came in with a sign about your destiny. The boy stopped, puffing with exhaustion. I'm sure it's just a common old garden that wandered away from the rest, said Hiccup, trying to sound careless, but unable to keep the excitement out of his voice. He could have something really marvellous in there. Maybe old Wrinkly was right. Old Wrinkly was Hiccup's grandfather on his mother's side. He had taken up soothsaying in his old age, and he kept on telling Hiccup how he had looked into the future and that Hiccup was destined for great things. This amazing dragon could be the beginning of his transformation from ordinary old Hiccup, who wasn't particularly good at anything at all, into a hero of the future. Hiccup took the basket off his back and paused before opening it. It's very still, isn't it? Said Fishlegs. Suddenly, less certain of the fate theory. I mean, it isn't moving at all in there. Are you sure it's alive? It's just very deeply asleep, said Hiccup. It was stone cold when I picked it up. Suddenly, he had a strong feeling that the gods were on his side. He knew that this dragon was alive. With trembling fingers, Hiccup undid the latch, took off the lid of the basket, and peered in. Fishlegs joined him. Things weren't looking quite so good anymore. There, curled up, fast asleep, in the bottom of the basket, in a tangled dragon knot, lay perhaps the most common or garden dragon Hiccup had ever seen. Absolutely, the only thing that was extraordinary about this dragon was how extraordinarily small it was. In this case, it was truly extraordinary. Most dragons that Vikings used for hunting purposes were about the size of a Labrador dog. The adolescent dragons the boys were collecting weren't quite that big, but they were nearly fully grown. This dragon was more comparable to a little West Highland Terrier. Hiccup couldn't think how he had overlooked this when he picked the dragon up in the tunnel. He supposed miserably that it was rather a pressured moment, what with 3,000 dragons trying to kill him all at the same time, and dragons in a deep sleep coma do tend to weigh more than they do when they're awake. Well, said Hiccup at last, that's a sign, if you like. You reach for a deadly nadder, and what do you get? A basic brown. I grab a dragon in the dark, and what do I get? A common or garden. The thing is, the gods are telling us, Fishlegs, that we are common or garden folk. You and I. We're not meant to be heroes. But you are meant to be a hero. Doesn't matter about me, said Fishlegs, but you are. Remember, you are the son of the chief and all that, and you will be one. I know you will. Fishlegs put the basket back on Hiccup's back, and they trudged towards the village gates together. At least, I sincerely hope you will. I don't want to be following Snotlout into battle. You've got more ideas about military tactics in your little finger than Snotlout has in his whole of his big fat head. That may have been true. Not only was Hiccup not about to be a future star of dragon training, but with this particular dragon, it was even going to be difficult for him to take his familiar place, fading into the background. It was so small, it was going to make him look ridiculous. It was so small that Snotlout was going to have some very, very unpleasant things to say about it. End of chapter 3. Right, okay guys, I'm going to go and stretch my legs a bit and just pause it for a while and come back and start again in a minute. We shall see you all very shortly with chapter 4, which is called How to Train Your Dragon, bizarrely. See you in a bit, guys.